back in June so that the questions don't step over one another. Just raise your hand, I'll see you, and I'll call on you. I want to thank you all for coming today. I also want to thank Director Baker for being here. He last visited with you in an extended period of time in mid-June, and he wanted to get in front of you here again as we get ready to start our fall season. So I want to thank him for his time, and he has a few remarks for you, and then we'll turn it over for questions. So, Mr. Baker.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for being here. And no real agenda for today other than just have a chance to sit and answer any questions that you may have. It's been an eventful summer, certainly at WU and in the athletic department, but also for the Big 12. And so I've not done any kind of availability post Big 12 expansion and all that, and thought it would be appropriate to do so before we get kicked off here. So had a great summer. Got my girls moved here, so they're both here. And I'm hoping this is a wood desk under here. There's been no tears. Everybody's happy and healthy, and they've started their school year, and they're getting all settled in. And I'm excited for the fall. Have already been to men's soccer exhibition match. I've already been to a women's soccer match. I'm excited to take in my first Mountaineer football game, walk the tailgates, partake in lots of sweets, maybe a pepperoni roll or two. I have a high commitment to eating, so I'm excited to do that. Just some things that are on our horizon. We're probably a couple months behind where I'd hoped to been on some of our initiatives, just because of the distractions that we've dealt with. But staff structure, we're really looking at that, especially at the senior leadership level. So my goal would be to restructure in a way that allows more efficient and timely decision making, and also not have quite as many direct reports directly to me, because we have a need for revenue, and I need to be a part of solving that by getting out and seeing our donors and seeing people. So I've tried to do a lot of that, but what I don't want is to bottleneck decisions back on campus. So you can look in the coming weeks for us to announce a little different staffing structure and how we're going to operate. We're launching our strategic visioning and initiatives platform. Steve Urias is helping me be the point person on that, but really it'll involve all aspects of our department. And so it's easy to say, for instance, we want to engage our letter winners in a more meaningful way. What does that mean? That may mean that we want to do more reunions, and we want to have a point person for those reunions so there's consistency in the way they're done. But we'll engage our letter winners in helping us decide how they could be more engaged. So that's just one small example of a whole list that will be across our entire department. We'll really lay out a 4 or 5 year plan of these are the things we want to fix, and the timing and the organization of how we want to do that. And then we will assess our facilities. And look, we've done a lot of facility work the last few years, but we know we have more work to do. When you look at our strengths here, the fan passion and loyalty, I think, is our biggest strength. And we have a lot. We have a tremendous following. Any metric that the Big 12 has shown us where they do valuations of the programs in the Big 12, we're always at or near that top grouping, and it's because of the affinity. But one of our weaknesses is our ability to really monetize that loyalty in a way. So, for example, this last weekend we had the 1891 Club event in here, and I had 2 or 3 people ask me about buying suites. We don't have any suites to sell them. So we've got to figure that out, because not only is that a revenue problem for us now, but we really cut ourselves off from some prospects of the future. And so we're really looking at things like that as we assess our facilities. So with that, I'll kind of close in terms of opening remarks and answer any questions that you may have. But I love fall. Fall is everybody's undefeated. Hope springs eternal. Everybody's going to make straight A's. Everybody's going to win national championships. But the energy that brings on campuses is tremendous. So my only complaint is, good Lord, at the traffic in Morgantown once the kids got back here. So that's changed my morning commute considerably. Questions?
Great. All right. So Wren, your answer could probably take an hour, but the Big 12 summer and the 4 editions and how you came to realize how it was happening. Give me the Reader's Digest version of all of that.
Yeah, Commissioner Yormark's a really excellent communicator, and that's a big part of leadership. So he's had regular meetings throughout that process. Really, there's a high frequency of communication and meetings until you get to the goal line, and then everything goes quiet once it gets to the goal line. No, there's only one way you can ensure confidentiality, and that is you don't tell anybody. So that last day or two, as you're watching the ups and downs and twists and turns, in real time on social media, and you don't know what's true and what's not true, I was with you. And he was candid and transparent. We got to a place where he said, "Listen, this will probably be our last meeting until you're getting a text from me saying that it's going to happen." And so I think when you look at where we were at in the Big 12 2 years ago, and I wasn't in the league at that time, but I'm a lifelong Big 12, Big 8 fan. The league was on the verge of extinction. I certainly would not have wanted to wager anything of value, not that I ever would, but on the survival of the Big 12 at that point. You guys probably felt the same. So when you look where we're at today, in my opinion, clearly in the top three of most stable, best positioned conferences moving forward in college athletics, it's a remarkable job by the leadership in the Big 12 when all of that happened. And certainly that started even with Commissioner Bowlesby, but Commissioner Yormark's done a great job of being aggressive, of helping make sure that everybody is aligned and on the same page. And there were a lot of twists and turns and a lot of contemplation, but ultimately our group was pretty aligned in if we could get the four corner schools, that made the most sense for the future of the league, and we should be patient and see if there's an opportunity to do that. And that's where the league ended up. And so I think we're a big winner in this round of conference realignment. And as you look at what's happening in the TV markets and there being shrinking resources, for the first time really in history, you look at the markets we picked up, and not just the market, but the penetration in those markets. I think we're positioned very well for the future.
Wren, this is, a really broad question here, but what do you need to improve, expand, enhance across your athletic department to really hit the ground running in a bigger, more vast Big 12?
Yeah, I hit on this a little bit in my opening remarks, but we've got to find a way to bring in more revenue. That's fine. We do not have a spending problem. If you look at compare us across a variety of spending categories, we're very efficient with the dollars that we have. But we've got to eat, breathe, sleep, and think 24/7, 365. How can we bring in more revenue? You go back and look at historically when our teams across the board have been the most successful. I would venture to say we probably were around the average, if not a little higher in the league in terms of budget. We're not there right now, and we've got to find a way to do that. There's lots of buckets. It's not all of them are big buckets, but they all add up. So if that's outside revenue, if that's finding a way to get more money coming in licensing, if that's creating more premium space opportunities. We had the Club 35 open up. Now we've got what we're calling Club Mountaineer right now. That's going to be open this fall. All of those things are additions to that revenue stream. But my job is to find a way for our coaches to have the tools in their tool belt that they need to be successful. And so that's going to be a big part of what we spend a lot of time thinking about strategy-wise.
Yeah. What did your conversation with Arizona State's athletic director end up being? Because that must have just kind of come out of nowhere when he said that.
I told him, man, I know you said this on Saturday, but I didn't really get hit with it till Sunday. I'm at home trying to get my Jesus on with my family and catching shrapnel over this. No, we had a great conversation, and I've known Ray not extraordinarily well, but we've known each other for a pretty good while. I suspected he didn't mean that the way it was taken, but it definitely hit a sore spot with all of us who are proud of West Virginia. And as somebody who really had not spent a lot of time in the state before I moved here, I'm a champion for people given West Virginia a chance as a place to live, as a place to visit, as a place to vacation. It is a beautiful place full of some wonderful people, and not enough people know about it. And so he was gracious. He was kind. I mean, he started the call by saying, "I'm really sorry. It was an attempt to be funny. President Crow knows I hate cold weather. He was giving me a hard time. I was giving him a hard time back. And he said it just didn't land like I thought it would. And he said I knew pretty quickly it didn't, because the first person who admonished him was his wife, he told me. So, but we had a great visit. He was very gracious. He was in Dallas. And doubled down on that graciousness. We teased back and forth a little bit. Some of the other ADs give him a hard time. So he knows that if he could go back, I don't think he would say that. But I did tell him, he said, I probably won't get a very warm welcome when I come to Morgantown. I said, I think it'll be the opposite. You better tell your logistics people how they're going to get home all your pepperoni rolls. I said, all West Virginians want is for people to give them a chance and to love it here. And so I said, I think you'll see a lot of kindness and a lot of people going out of their way to show you how great it is here when you come visit.
We'll go to Keenan, then Justin.
When it comes to football scheduling, Ren, do you have a preference with how it would work out? I know there's a lot of different options on the board, but do you personally have a preference?
Yes, and that's partly contingent upon what the conference schedule looks like, right? So in this environment where we have 9 conference games, that means some years you're going to have 5 home games, and some years you're going to have 4 from your conference schedule. I think it's important to the state and to Morgantown that we always, at a minimum, have 6 home games, but we'd like to have 7. So you start to do the math on that, and it starts to restrict a little bit your opportunities. It's why that one FCS game is important, because it just ensures that you can get an affordable home game on the schedule. I've said before, and I believe this, I think having a Power 5 regional rival on the schedule every year is important. We would probably prefer that be Pitt. That game, it's not, I'm not a brain surgeon, but it didn't take me very long to figure out that's a very important game to our fan base and to theirs and to this area and this region. But in years when it's not Pitt, who's another regional rival that we could take on? Is that Virginia Tech? This year we have Penn State. And then can we get a meaningful group of 5 FBS opponent that either we pay some money to come in here or we do some type of 2-for-1 scenario. But you would like for it to be a game with some kind of regional meaningfulness. So one of the MAC schools, maybe a Sun Belt school. We're not eager or probably willing to go to Huntington, but I don't know that we would say no to Marshall if they wanted to come here. And so, those are, as you're building a schedule out, that's probably the perfect schedule. It's challenging. It has some meaningful games, but it doesn't beat your team down to a point to where they're not ready to go come conference time.
Along those lines, Big 12 structure for the 9 conference games, would you like to see divisions, odds? Is there anything you prefer?
Certainly, we need to look at scheduling in all sports, but in particular the sports that don't charter, right? So let's, when you talk about football, for instance, would we like to cut down on travel in football? Sure. But those CFP spots are going to be so meaningful, especially in the expanded playoff, that you start to lock into divisions or pods in football, and you can put yourself at a disadvantage when it comes time to getting those CFP spots. And so, for instance, let's just say you play in divisions and you have a championship game. You could have somebody win a division that hurts somebody in the championship game and knocks you out of a CFP spot. But if you're set up in a way where you take your top 2 CFP ranked teams to your championship game, that's a little bit different. So take that aside for a second, because there's a lot of money and things tied up in that. But you look at soccer, baseball, teams that are not flying big charter jets and getting home that night. They're staying the night and they're getting up the next morning. They're catching a 6:30, 7 a.m. flight. They're going through connecting airports, because Pittsburgh has some directs, but a lot of places you got to connect to. If we can schedule, my opinion is if there's an opportunity to schedule in divisions or pods or whatever, that's something that we need to fully explore and fully look at. Coaches should be engaged in that conversation. I think the Student Athlete Advisory Council should have a voice in that conversation. But I've been pretty steadfast in our Big 12 conversations that that's something that we need to look at when it comes time. Now, to be honest, we're just now starting those conversations because it really didn't do a lot of good to it's pretty detailed, complicated work, so you don't want to do it unless you're expanding. But now that we're there's subcommittees looking at that, and I think I'm on the men's basketball one. But every sport will have a subcommittee that'll look at different scheduling models.
Justin, and then Greg.
I mean, if you go back to like 2011, 2012, when the school was transitioning from the Big East to the Big 12 to begin with, I'm not sure what the percentage was, but obviously like the travel budget went up a certain percent, probably significantly. With these new additions now westward in the league, have you guys even begun to look at what more is it going to cost WVU? You know, like you said, soccer, there's the teams that don't charter. I mean, obviously, it's, to go further west.
Our financial folks in the athletic department are starting to model some of that out just so that we can understand it. Now, so much of that is you're trying to look at different scenarios, but if we can wait a few weeks, we'll know the scenario because this is happening so fast. We're going to know pretty quick what those schedules have to look like. And so, but yeah, we're starting to model that some. And listen, there's a possibility, depending on how we schedule in certain sports, we could reduce cost, right? I mean, like if we could lock in and play in divisions, you could potentially cut some cost. But there's also a lot of models out there where it could go up, and so we've got to really drill down on that because it does affect us in a more disadvantageous way than it does other teams who might be more centrally located in the league.
Ren, in terms of increasing finances and revenue, naming rights would seemingly be an area. Your thoughts on that? Do you think you're near something? What's the process there?
We're exploring that in all of our venues, and have had some third parties engaged just to do some valuations on what that could bring. Certainly, the juice needs to be worth the squeeze because people get pretty attached to certain names on venues, and I get that. But they also get attached to winning, right? And winning takes, as I outlined earlier, takes money. And so it's something that we're evaluating and definitely are going to look at. And I think it's an opportunity for us, given the reach of our brand, given that there is no, if you want to advertise your company in the state of West Virginia, there is no better organization to partner with than WVU Athletics. I mean, that's period. We have the biggest reach of any organization in this state. And so if there's an opportunity to monetize that, we've got to look really hard at it. And we are engaged in getting some early evaluations to say, okay, these are the venues that we think could have some corporate naming or even some individuals to name. And here's what we think those would bring in from a dollar perspective.
Next will be Bob, and then we'll go to Wes.
Conference merry-go-round, so to speak, has distracted you quite a bit, I presume. But you still have two coaching situations that are, in flux. You've had a chance to evaluate Neil up to now and what he did in the offseason and the like, and you also are not sure what's going to happen in basketball. Where do you stand on all that, and what's your feeling? Has it changed? Has it gone anywhere?
Yeah. And we had baseball in the middle of all of this spring too, and I'm excited about the transition there, and I'm excited if we still have a place for Coach Mazey, who's done an amazing job to help us transition into that. Let's talk about football first. I've been really impressed with not just Coach Brown, but all of our coaches here, and have spent one-on-one time with all of them. I've tried to get over here. I think I've made all the scrimmages and several practices. So some of those scrimmages are closed. If you guys want me to call and give you a scouting report afterwards, I maybe could do that. Coach Brown wouldn't like it very much, but I'm excited. I feel good about where we're at. Feel good about the team, their resolve. I think the prognosticators not having very high expectations has helped motivate them. I think it's helped motivate all of us, really. We want to go out and prove people wrong. But there's a lot of things that are done right inside this program. When you just look at it, I talk a lot about my core belief is you have to value the person over the player. And if you value the person first and foremost, then eventually you'll get the full abilities out of the player. And this staff does a great job of really pouring into developing people, helping them grow their character, helping them have success academically, helping them really plan for the rest of their life. And so there is a lot of positive things going on with this program. We know that we have to win games. I mean, Coach Brown has said that. I read his commentary all the time. He knows where we're at, and everybody knows that that's an expectation. But I think I'm really proud of the way that this team has kind of come together, and there is a great camaraderie between that group right now. Men's basketball, I think Coach Eilert's done everything we could have asked him to do and would hope he would do. During that time, there were lots of people that were offering lots of opinions on what we should do and the timing of it. But the reality is, when we had the situation we did in a coaching change and everybody and the portal was reopened for everybody, there was going to be some roster attrition. That was going to happen no matter what we did or how quickly we did it. You have basically unrestricted free agency at the least opportune time. And so I knew that. The day as we were dealing with that in real time. But we tried to move as quickly as we could to make the best decisions we could. Hopefully people understand the logic behind that. Maybe they agree, maybe they don't. And then we've tried to give Coach Eilert everything that he needs to be successful. So he's made, some changes and additions to his coaching staff. They've been able to make some additions to the roster, I think, up to this point. And, we haven't played a game, and he hasn't, he's been in his off season in terms of practice and that kind of stuff. But I think up to this point, he's handled everything as well as you could possibly ask. And I'm really proud of the work that they've been able to do.
With the interim title that you have, are you hearing are you being lobbied by coaches, possible, job applications?
No, because I don't open up for that. I'm pretty, somebody tries to call me about one of our jobs and the job's not open, I will very quickly cut that off and say the job's not open. I don't think that's, I'm a little bit old school that way. I don't think you talk to people or lobby or campaign for a job when that job's not open. And so, there hasn't been a lot of that, in terms of lobbying on the basketball front. But I also have been pretty clear that I'm not willing to do that right now. Season hasn't even begun. We haven't played one game, and Coach Eilert, his staff, those players, they deserve my attention and support to be on them in this season and what we can get accomplished. And there will come a time and place when we evaluate what would come next.
Let me go one final question about the transfer portal and the waiver situation. Does that have to change?
I think what we went through this summer is the first time somebody's really went through that at that period of time, and I think we have to address that in some way, shape, or form. I mean, that was I had colleagues all over the country asking me how we were unpacking and dealing with that, because you never know. It could happen, it could happen to you. But that was a pretty difficult situation on everybody, on our coaches, on our players, on other players. I mean, we had players who very much wanted to stay here, but as you lose more and more, they also, if they've got 1 year left, or even if they've got 2 years left, they want to be somewhere where they feel like they can make the tournament and have success and, be surrounded by the pieces they need. And so, it becomes a little bit of a snowball rolling down the hill sometimes. And so, I do think it's something that we got to look at and address. And I've been pretty clear that I'm not the old school get off my lawn guy. We need to rewind this back to 10 years ago. I'm a younger AD. I understand that when adults, meaning the coaches and the administrators, have the freedom and ability to change programs, that the student athletes need to have a certain amount of freedom. But you can't have a situation like that becomes pretty untenable.
Since your arrival, you've kind of promoted the idea of wanting the best wellness for all these athletes. When you go for the Olympic sports, who are now having to make multiple cross-country trips, most likely in conference play, and do it late nights, early mornings, as you said, how do you still sell that idea of wanting the full wellness for these student athletes?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm not going to sit here and act like. Let me just say this. I'll even rewind this a little bit. I'm really excited about where the Big 12's positioned and how this round of conference realignment impacted the Big 12. I'm sad for the Pac-12. As a college athletics fan, to have a conference that represented a lot of the Western-based institutions be where they're at right now, the crossroads and the position they're in, that makes me sad, candidly. But I'm very happy for WVU because there seems to be some kind of consolidation around how many schools there's going to be in power conferences and how many power conferences there's going to be, and we're positioned very, very well. And there's been times in our history, most of the times in our history, where that wasn't necessarily the case. Either we were in peril or our conference was in peril, right? And so when you talk about student-athlete health, welfare, their experience, I think you have to think about that too, because there's some institutions that were in the Pac-12 cashing $30-40 million distribution checks a couple of years ago that a year from now may be having to cut $20-25 million from their budget. So, I could argue that student-athlete experience is going to potentially suffer. So I believe that there is a way for us to come together as a conference and look at scheduling that doesn't send track teams, soccer teams, volleyball teams all the way to Utah to play every year. We have 16 teams. Not everybody sponsors every sport, but that gives you potentially 2 divisions of 8, gives you potentially 4 pods of 4. There's a lot of creative things that we can, and we have an obligation, in my opinion, as a conference to explore. And I don't know where that's going to end. I've got one vote in the room when it comes to schedules. But I have been very consistent in raising the point of there's a way for us to cut considerable expense and more importantly, to keep student athletes in the classroom and out of hotels and airports more than we do now with this expansion. This expansion does not have to mean that we have to travel further, right? It could, and in my opinion should mean we can actually travel less because we have more teams that would afford us the opportunity to not play everybody round robin.
Luke and then Justin.
Talking about Eilert in the interim position, has there been any discussion of goals or benchmarks that should be met that can help his chances of keeping the job beyond this 1 year?
Yeah, he and I have had a lot of discussions about just expectations and how you run a program and the integrity that we expect and ethically what we're looking for. We have not, and I've been pretty consistent in saying this about every sport. I'm not a big, you got to win X number of games guy, or you got to, I know President Gee joked, if you win a national championship, maybe we might remove that tag. And that was just just a candid kind of joke he made with Hoppy. But we're all very supportive of Coach Eilert. I hope that he has a great year and gives us a lot to think about. If you go back to May, I set the tone of what the expectation for us is, and that is that we're going to give him full autonomy, full decision-making to do the very best he can do this season. At the conclusion of the season, we'll conduct a search for a coach. My hope is that he does a great job and that he's part of that search. As the season goes along, I evaluate every day, and so we'll get many chances to do that. But in terms of like a set criteria of like, here's these boxes, if you check them, all off, the job is yours. I just think there's too many things in sports that are beyond your control. You can't control injuries, can't control a call from a referee, even though there's lots of our fans that try. you just can't control all of that. And so we're really looking at what kind of job did you do, controlling the things that you can control and helping young people grow and get better as people and as players. And did you pour into them? And are you the kind of coach who values the person above the player? And, all of those things go into that decision matrix.
Since July, there's been a back and forth between Bob Huggins' lawyer and West Virginia's general counsel. Kind of asking your opinion here. Is there an end game in sight on that particular instance? And in your opinion, I mean, what is that end game? I mean, what do you think there?
Yeah, so probably can't say a lot there just because there is back and forth between lawyers, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to get in trouble with our lawyers. But I'll just leave it at this. I have a lot of admiration and respect for Coach and what he accomplished here. I've said this before. He and I have never had a bad word. I wish that the transition could have happened differently. My guess is that he does as well. He's a mountaineer. Sometimes in families there's disagreements and there's hard feelings, and sometimes people get over those and sometimes they don't. And my hope is that at some point we can all look back on this and move past it. But I don't know in terms of an end game. I'm not in control really of either side of that, and so I don't know if there is one or if we're near it or where we're at on that journey. I'll just say that I appreciate the contributions that he made to the basketball program, and that appreciation has not changed as we went through this.
Still very much, would you call it very much a fluid situation right now still? Or?
As far as I know, nobody has sent me anything saying, hey, this is fully resolved. But, I haven't seen anything else to say it's not either. So
Going back to my initial question, your answer about revenue, where do you want to spend more money that you generate would be one. And I think what the second question was. Suites. You mentioned that. I don't know if that's just an example of something.
Yeah.
There's been conversations before that they'd be great to have, but there might not be enough people to outsource them for X number of years in advance. Those are two questions, I guess. But what would you spend on, and where do suites are there?
yeah, so I do think there's appetite to sell suites, and I don't buy into that we don't have enough people who can afford them to build more suites. The demographics of our alumni base and fan base is not any different than a lot of other Big 12 schools, many that sell a lot more club seats and suites than we do. It's more about availability, and I can tell you I get asked a lot about the opportunity to buy suites, and so it's something we're looking at. We feel like if there's a path where we could get a big gift or two, then you can build those, and they'll not only cash flow from the suite rental, but they can be a positive to the bottom line. You pay your mortgage, so to speak, and then you still have money left to contribute. As the revenue comes in, there's a variety of places that you can spend it. And about every metric you would look at, we're probably below our peers. So in terms of spending, some not far below. So some we're closer, but some we're way off. And what happens is you have a budget. I believe right now out of the 10, we're 9th. Well, then if you take out debt service and travel, we move to 10th. All right. So anywhere where you spend, let's just say 5th, there's somewhere else you're spending 10 and quite a bit below 10 because all the levers are connected. I try and explain this to coaches all the time. You're coming to me asking for a decision on this one item, but what you don't realize is it's all dominoes and they're all connected, and anywhere we spend more over here is we got to spend less over here. But my intent would be to invest really back into the programs and the support staff that helps the program. So, for instance, the explosion of video and graphic design, and we have invested recently in our creative and video department. But if we could add 10 positions there today, we could keep those people busy. Like there's so much more demand than supply for what we can actually provide, because people, they love that content. And I mean, Mike was, when I came in here, was talking about kind of the coaches at this point. They want to do a graphic for Dog Day. They want to do a graphic for National Donut Day, which I'm for. I think we should highlight donuts. So there's just always something. But those are the areas where there's a return, right? Fans engage in that, recruits engage in that, so there's an ROI. I would say, really, if I had to hone in, it would be on the player development areas, so nutrition, strength and conditioning, sports medicine, and then in those digital and creative areas, that's probably the areas where I would highlight as areas that we really could spend and also see an ROI for all sports, not just football and basketball, but our Olympic sports. I mean, they need that stuff too, and there's much less availability for them than there is for football and basketball.
You mentioned Pitt earlier. I know you have 6 games on the books after this year. Had any discussions about maybe extending that further?
Yeah, so I know Heather. We've known each other for probably, it's probably 8 or 9 years now. So I've told her that we want to play as much and as long as they want to play. I called her several months back to express our interest in continuing the basketball series. Football didn't come up at that time because it was more of a basketball perspective, but I know there's willingness on our part to extend in pretty much every sport our series with Pitt. I believe that's the case on their end. She was pretty positive when I talked to her, but we probably need to follow back up and circle up and see what that really looks like. I don't know if that means every year, every other year, if they want to take a break off and then resume. We'll have to see.
We have time for one more question. Anybody else? Okay, right here, Cody.
Better make it a good one, Cody. Mike was going to ask another one. I mean, the guy's like an MMA fighter up there. You don't want to take his question.
I wanted to ask if you had read Senator Manchin's bill, and if you had any thoughts on it, because I know President Gee had put input and commented on it.
Yeah, so I've read summaries and highlights of all of the bills that are out there. There's 3 primary ones, but I've read Senator Manchin's in great detail, because he was asking, and his staff was asking for feedback in real time from not just me, but primarily from President Gee, our general counsel, all of those people. I think Senators Manchin and Tuberville did a good job of trying to provide protections for student athletes, but also trying to provide some guardrails that make sense. There's going to be some give and take, and I don't necessarily want to restrict student athletes. I mean, I've been on record saying this. We should be in the business of providing opportunities for student athletes, and opportunities at this point does include NIL. But the system we have right now, where nobody knows what's really going on, there is no assurances when someone's promised something that they're getting delivered what was promised. There's no penalty nor required registrations for people who are involved in negotiating some of these deals. Some of the percentages being charged to student athletes is obscene. I just think that there's a lot more guardrails that could really make the process better for everybody. And so, I'm supportive of the efforts of Senators Manchin and Senators Tuberville, and I think President Gee as well.
Wren, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Have a great what's left of summer. 1 week. You got to go to work next week.